Magnus Carlsen losing a single game? That's rare. But 2 Armageddon losses in the same tournament? And on home turf in Norway? That's unheard of. After falling to Hikaru Nakamura, Magnus faces yet another Armageddon, this time against Chinese Grandmaster Wei Yi. He may not be a household name, but don't be fooled, Wei Yi is dangerous. It's the 2025 Norway Chess tournament. Wei Yi plays black with 7 minutes, Magnus with 10 minutes, but he must win. A draw means defeat. Let's get into this wild game. Magnus opens with d4, and Wei Yi responds with knight f6. Then he plays g6, going for a kingside fianchetto. Knight c3, Jabava London vibes. d5 from Wei Yi. Magnus plays e3, Wei develops with bishop g7. And now an aggressive move, h4. Wei Yi shuts it down with h5. Knights develop, knight f3, castle for black, and knight e5 from Magnus jumping into the center. Wei Yi challenges with c5. Magnus keeps tension with queen d2, eyeing a long castling. Bishop for f5, solid square for the bishop. f3 from Magnus. A signal e4 or g4 might be coming. Now c takes d4, e takes d4, and knight c6. All of black's pieces are out. Bishop b5 from Magnus, final piece joins the party. Trade of the knights on e5, and Wei Yi knight retreats to d7, hitting the e5 pawn. Magnus decides to take the knight, but doesn't snap out the free pawn on d5. He probably thought the 2 bishops plus open cd files would give black too much counterplay. Instead, long castle. A bold and risky decision. Wei immediately goes for pressure with rook c8, and now Magnus takes the pawn. But hold on. Rook sacrifice. A rook takes c3. Yes, Wei Yi is playing for a win, despite needing only a draw. This deserves a like. Magnus takes the queen, black take the pawn on c2 with the check, and land the discovered check with a rook takes g2. The check is from the bishop. If the king runs, white loses the queen anyway, so Magnus takes the bishop. At least the pawns are doubled now. Let's take a breather. We're in an endgame. Black is up a pawn, 6 versus 5, but with double f pawns, it's still equal. Magnus activates rook d7, classic 7th rank pressure. Wei Yi prepares a trap, rook c8, eyeing the 2nd rank. Magnus grabs the pawn on e7, it's now an endgame, but Wei Yi wastes no time. He immediately attacks the bishop. After it retreats to c1, Wei Yi realizes that simply doubling the rooks on the 2nd rank won't achieve much. White bishop protects the b2 pawn. So instead he plays the strong and flexible b5, gaining space and setting up future ideas. Magnus could have taken the pawn on a7 here, but instead he brings his other rook into action, aiming for activity over material. Wei Yi now grabs the pawn on h4, and here comes rook e8 check, king h7, and now the first mistake. Magnus captures the pawn on f7. At first glance it looks harmless, even aggressive, but it underestimates black's idea to pin the bishop and strangle white's mobility. Then comes the real blunder. Rook takes f5. A natural looking move, but it's fatal. It allows Wei Yi to respond with the cold-blooded king g6, attacking the rook and threatening a deadly net. Magnus realized that if he retreats the rook anywhere except f4, it will be lost. So he plays rook f4. But that's exactly what Wei Yi wanted. Now comes the precision, rook g1, sharp and surgical. Black is now doubling down, targeting the pinned bishop. Magnus tries to fight back with a check, rook d6 check, but it doesn't change much. After king h7, he plays a4. But it leaves the bishop on c1 completely hanging. Why did black want the rook on f4? Well, if white had played a rook c6 instead of a4, trying to defend the bishop, then black had the brilliant combo. Rook takes c1, rook takes c1, rook takes c1, king takes c1, and then bishop h6. a bishop skewer that picks up the very rook on f4. That's why the rook had to be lured there. It was all part of the trap. Back to the game. After a4, Wei Yi plays rook takes c1 check, snapping off the bishop with the check, and then attacks both rooks at once with the bishop. But Magnus has rook f7 check, trying to stay in the game. After king g8, he connects his rooks, and for a moment it looks like he is surviving. Wei Yi takes the a4 pawn. And after king a3, calmly plays rook c4. Magnus sees the writing on the wall and resigns. He is down a bishop with no counterplay, no checks, no hope. Yes, there is always the danger of a back rank trick of ladder mate. But not here, not at this level, not against Wei Yi. Let's recap the shockers. Magnus loses his second Armageddon in a row. He enters a technically draw endgame and still stumbles with 2 consecutive mistakes. And he gets outplayed by a player who is not a household name, although he is the best player in China. Yes, it's him, not Ding Liren, according to the rating. The tournament rolls on, and knowing Magnus, he will rise again. But this game, this was Wei Yi's moment. Smash that like button if you enjoyed the drama. Hit subscribe for more high-level breakdowns like this. And let me know in the comments, did Magnus crack under pressure, or was it just a brilliance from Wei Yi?